This is an introduction to three-point perspective. What I have on the screen at this point is examples of what we did during weeks 1 and 2. So we have our 1-point perspective box where the depth recedes to a vanishing point. A 2-point perspective where we could look at something like the width and the depth receding back. So basically of the two sides going off, but yet the height lines still remain parallel to each other. There's no converging lines at that point. In a 3-point perspective situation, we need to have 3 vanishing points. So we still build off the left and right vanishing points, but we have a third vanishing point, and these are for the height lines. When making this selection, you need to determine whether you're looking at a bird's eye view or a worm's eye view. So worm's eye view looking up at a structure, bird's eye view looking down. And unlike these situations, you can really do much more interesting visual spaces. You could put the third point in the middle. You could have this convergence where the buildings are all around you, put you kind of in the middle of a scene rather than looking on a scene. But those are for the other examples. You can definitely take some time to look at those. But in this case, we're going to start with just a vertical line, and it's going to come out of the third vanishing point. We're going to use this to start to develop the height of the structure. Much like in 2-point, we could just start with a vertical line and we can establish the height at that point. Here we need this guideline to be at the same angle and to maintain that consistency. We can go ahead and establish the bottom of the structure with our left and right. And then to establish that the rear sides of this, again, we're going to go back to our third vanishing point. And a lot of what 3-point perspective is going to depend on is the context. Because right now this probably looks like a pyramid shape, but as you add details, as you build that cityscape, it's going to become much clearer to the viewer. These initial steps, obviously, it can be hard to kind of see where they're going, which is why we're going to walk through this. Again, going back to the left and right vanishing points, establishing the height of the structure, and from here we can darken these lines in. Let's go ahead and do that. I'll make them a little bit wider. And so we can actually see this building. So the idea of this being like a tall building, and we're looking at it from ground level, looking up at it. And so hopefully, building off of what we've done, this should be pretty straightforward. But there's a number of places where it can be easy to get stuck on. And so if you have questions, make sure to let me know right away. We can address them before you dive into the assignment. But basically, this is kind of a fairly standard box shape. We can still do the transparent if we wanted to, but that gets to be a little bit further. What we would like to start to see, though, is we looked at dividing spaces, creating those fence posts, walkways. You can do this in 3-point perspective too. And I have another image that, if you need this file, I can definitely post it for you. But again, we have that kind of standard 3-point perspective. And what I've done here is I've used that simple method of dividing it. Just put an X in the middle, bring out our center lines, and then divided each of those 4 spaces up again with smaller X's, and then been able to, of course, go through the centers of those with more guidelines, and broke this up into 16 squares. Now, you can take this as far as you want. Unlike a fence approach where you build the fence post off of the previous one, this allows you to break up a defined space, so you don't really have to define the height of the structure by starting with that method, just breaking it down into pieces. But the downside is you have to stick with fairly even pieces. Odd numbers can be a little bit, it makes it trickier, and so it's much easier if you go with kind of that 2, 4, 8 scenario. Here you see I've broken it down again, but instead of just making windows or something, you can do a lot with this. So in this case, I've taken the intersections of where these meet on the sides, in the middle, and I've just connected lines. So almost like the facade of a building. And you can do this on the other side too, really have it wrap around. But just one idea of how to approach this. Take that, if we remove the guidelines, kind of where you're left, and then you can take it a step further and take it back to the other vanishing point, start to create depth, almost like a vent or something of that nature. But there's a lot of room to go beyond those basic aspects, and that's something that as we move into later weeks, you're going to want to consider. What do I do with the information I know? We talked about during week 2 that you can take guidelines from fence and extend them and create a sidewalk situation without adding new guidelines. This is kind of building off that idea that we can reuse information we have, approach it in unique ways, and help add that sense of personality to our images.